Welcome to the Friendly Aussie Podcast.
Welcome to the Friendly Aussie Podcast. Today, I have Joel Hardy, the CEO of CYMRA Life Sciences. He is also the founder. They grow cannabis for the Australian market, potentially the international. I'm not sure, but we're about to find out. How are you, Joel?
Very good. Very good. Thanks.
We haven't ever had a legal grower on our cast, I don't think. We've had doctors, we've had clinic owners, but we haven't had a legal grower, and I've been super excited to get you on to have a little chat about what's going on in the Australian cannabis industry at the roots level, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's an important topic to bring up. Some of the Australian cultivators, there's a fair amount of struggles that we've all been through based on some of the laws that have been in place previously that might have changed a bit better to now. But I still think we need to be supporting more Australian growers and Australian industry in particular to just provide more jobs in this industry compared to other cannabis countries like Canada and America. So I'm excited to be on here, Joseph.
Thank you. It is a frustrating thing when you realize most of the medicinal cannabis is being imported, yet we have some of the most fertile land for growing cannabis in the world. And we produce a lot of it. We do produce a lot, but it all goes overseas from what I've understood.
Yeah, I think in illegally we produce a lot. Excuse me, we produce a ton, so... we have always had a good supply of cannabis, particularly in the region where we're growing, which is in the Rainbow region up in near Byron. So, most people that I speak to in Byron have got a dealer and they know that grows organically in the hills there, and they get a good supply. Now, I don't think it applies always to the city where you've got sometimes limited supply and potentially some of the products are, a bit deteriorated or not as great, but that doesn't always apply to everyone. It just depends on some people.
Yep.
But it is a big shame that we've really sort of favoured imports, and that's not always to do with consumers or patients. It's actually come down to the government laws, and which is starting to change a little bit. But I think unfortunately the imported products have had a head start because clearly Canada and America have been growing cannabis for a little while longer than us. So I think patients will see the quality of Australian products get better and better over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very exciting for people because we do want, Australian products. It makes sense to have. But how did you come into having a farm in one of the most luxurious places in the world in the hinterlands of Byron Bay and just decide, you know what, I'm growing some weed. I'm doing it.
Actually, yes, I didn't have a farm, but my story started in California, actually. I was working there in technology for about 6 years, lived in San Francisco, and actually was part of the time when it went from, the green card, the medical card, into the full-on recreational. So I experienced a lot of change in that industry, and I saw what was going on with society and how it was helping people health-wise and stuff. And I realized this is good for the earth. It's good for the community. And California was a great place to live, and I loved it. So I was like, this is going to happen in Australia. And then eventually what happened in Canada, I went over there and researched there as well. And then met my business partner who was in horticulture, and we decided to buy a farm and start a business. So, and the rest is history, I suppose. But yeah, I didn't choose Byron Bay on purpose. Byron Bay kind of chose me, and there was an available site with what we needed on it from a greenhouse perspective, and we just got up and going and sort of hustled.
How long did it take from the moment you decided, okay, we're going to do a farm, to, doing all the paperwork for your licenses and that, to actually being able to plant some seeds?
It felt like a lifetime. It was probably 4 years.
4 years, wow. And how much money would have gone into that?
Probably not at liberty to say, but multiple millions of dollars. So a lot of capital has gone into it.
A lot of capital.
I'm very lucky. I have patient investors and people who believed in the long-term future of the industry. We made our missteps, probably just like everyone else. In fact, I would say one of the things that I didn't see coming was the size of the flower market. I thought it was going to be more oils and other formats that were probably more medical. And so that we had to do a little pivot there as well from a growing perspective. So yeah, it's just been ups and downs. And finally, I think as a business, we're starting to, ramp up now in our production and get our flower to be of a better quality and consistent and bigger production runs and things like that.
Yeah, I'll get to your flower a little later, I think, because I've definitely tried a little bit, and I'm happy to share what I've experienced from your organic growing, which honestly has been sensational. But do you think it's at all feasible for an everyday sort of person to be able to try and start a farm, or is it just actually probably too out of reach? You really need to go into that corporate space, or how would a regular bloke that's, maybe got some savings, is ready to put some money down to try and do it? Is it possible?
Zosip, I'd love to say it is, and I'd love to say it's like a micro cultivation permit in Canada, but the reality is that's not the case. Unfortunately, just the size of the infrastructure required, the equipment, and the regulatory burden and the quality burden, and even just the fees associated with the ODC all sort of preclude anything probably less than a couple of $1 million. That's the reality. And if you own a farm with a greenhouse on it and maybe you have some of that equipment, you could probably do it quite cheaply. But again, that's, a whole season of not growing something else and no cash flow. So you have to be pretty committed. I think the government should be doing more to incentivize or encourage Australian growers in a micro cultivation sense. I also believe in home grow. I have no problems with home grow. I just think we've got to make sure it comes from a legal source, that just to make it all legal, I suppose, and not turn into an illegal operation. But yeah, I would. There's plenty of people out there that are looking for jobs or to try and work in the industry, and I don't think the Australian government is doing a very good job of supporting that. Yeah,
no, it's frustrating because I see a lot. I probably go and seek maybe once a fortnight, and I just type in cannabis. What's going on in this industry? Let's see what jobs are rolling. And occasionally you'll see like a horticulturalist or like something in the agriculture area to work at a farm. But then you want to go in there and then it's police checks to the nth degree, absolutely no cannabis. Some companies have very strict, no cannabis policies. Meanwhile, we would know for damn well that the person who knows how to grow cannabis is probably using it like they wouldn't do it otherwise.
Yeah.
So in terms of incentivizing, I don't even like to call it the black market. I've called it the green market for a few years now because it seems kind of rude. It should have never been put in the black market. But, people coming from that space, it seems like there's a bit of a wall for them to even get through. And they even need qualifications on top of it, despite probably knowing more than a lot of the people that are growing that cannabis just due to years and years of experience. Down in that Byron area, or even you just go in a little more towards Nimbin and Mullum and all of that, there's people there that have been growing for 30 to 60 odd years. I don't think there are people that would have nearly that experience anywhere else. They would run a farm, no problem.
Oh, I think, Josip, there's a lot of elements you've just put forward there, but I'll try and answer them in sort of succession. So, the government enforces the fact we cannot hire someone with a criminal record specifically for supply of prohibited drugs. That's just the law. I don't agree with it, but that's just the law. So I can't hire anyone that has a criminal record. Now, as to anyone that doesn't, I can hire them. So just because they don't have a horticultural degree doesn't mean they don't get hired at my company or our company. So that's not true. I think some companies have adopted that approach, but I don't agree with that in the slightest. I would say that I don't really want to quote it, but a large percentage of our employees all have medical cards, and they all smoke cannabis or consume cannabis regularly. So that's also a myth to think that that's not happening in companies, because I don't know how you can have a company that doesn't believe in it if they don't understand the drug.
Soulless company.
Yeah, probably. But I think each to their own, right? I try not to judge too much. And then I think the other thing that I think people underestimate is this is such a regulated industry, and it's a large scale greenhouse or indoor facility with a lot of employees and a lot of people. Joseph, a lot of, growers love growing because of the peace and quiet and the isolation of being with their plants. And that's why I think home grow is for some people, and others, for someone like me, I don't have the patience or the time to I'd rather just go to the shop, to be honest, or the chemist and buy the quality stuff myself. That's why people don't always buy home brews for beer. Some people, beers. Yeah. So I think it's the same wines. So I think it's the same thing. You can go and do these things on your own, but just the people who really enjoy it should be able to. And I think that environment, you need to have responsibility with paperwork, reporting to people, timelines, deadlines, getting assessed on an annual basis whether you're performing or not. Like, that is another skill and another element of working at a bigger company that's highly regulated. Like, we're highly regulated. You know what I mean? It's not just a general sort of small business that is sort of not touched or selling at a cafeteria. It's people, they know what we're doing every time we do something. So the reality is we've got to keep doing it, because if we don't do it, then we'll get in trouble and we'll get shut down. So that type of environment requires a little bit of pressure and a little bit of different skills that maybe not every illegal grower has. Now, we probably have some people that may have or may have not, but I think they've adapted well to the operating environment.
That makes a lot of sense. I was thinking, like, how interesting would it be to write that cover letter for the job? It's like, well, I've grown some tomato plants. They grew really large.
I don't think. I think you'll find that the people who have experience, tend to have it in America sometimes, or other countries. Yeah. But it's fairly obvious to me. It's not. I don't not know. Put it that way. Yeah,
that makes plenty of sense.
Figure it
out. No, it's good to know that there's a little, because we come from the cultural side at Fab. So it's nice to know that at least some people from the culture are coming into these into businesses such as your own or any other place within the legal industry and trying to kind of work through it. It's good to know, because I think on the cultural side, we're all watching the medicinal industry and we know that they're there to make profits off of us, right? And we're just trying to make sure that they're doing at least something right by us. And a lot of the stoners, or, however we want to call it, a lot of these cannabis users, we're just sitting here watching it. It's like they're trying to peddle us their stuff, yet they're not one of us. But it's nice to know at a farm such as your own that there are people that are us that actually care about the plant. They're not necessarily looking at, this is going to yield us a lot more, so we're going to do that. You're looking at that outcome, and maybe you're finishing a week later than you were supposed to, just because you're like, oh well, this isn't actually quite as developed as we thought it would have been. We want more amber trichomes or something like that.
Yeah. And I think, so for me, cannabis, it's scheduled as a drug right now, right? But as you have pointed out, it's a way of life and it's an experience, actually. And I've always known about that for a while, having lived in California, but also in my youth. And I think I've always pictured owning a cannabis farm that was organic, because I've been to organic sites in California and seen what they've done there. And I've been to other sites where I walked in and went, this is just like no sort of, I don't enjoy being here. It's just like a big chemical factory, I didn't see that. So I've always wanted it to be more of a proper farm. So we grow organically in soil. I know we'll get to this later, but I think at the same time, we have a policy, or a part of our cultural values is you've got to love, if you don't love the plant and you don't love the product, then don't work here. Now, there is different levels of love, right? There's love that I want to smoke it every day, and there's love that I love just watching this plant grow, because it's such a wonderful plant that produces the most amount of terpenes I've ever seen in my life. That love is also acceptable in this company that we're trying to build here. So I think we try to build that in there, albeit underneath a massively regulatory and framework. It's somewhat difficult sometimes, but I think you look at California, you look at Canada, the companies that are succeeding and people love to is buying local, like buying your local grower and your person who makes the products you like. And I think smaller kind of craft people are going to be more successful. That's my opinion anyway, and I hope that that's the case.
I would love to see like an artisanal market eventually open up. However that happens, I don't think it will happen under the medical guise. Maybe when we get to some sort of recreational model, that's where it will be. But until then, I'll see old mate every so often, but most of the time I'm seeing my doctor nowadays. Prices are kind of cheaper than the streets in a lot of the cities when you go through the medicinal, and you're covered. So,
Correct.
and you know what you're getting. Like, that's probably the biggest factor more than anything.
I think there's three, exactly the ones you said. I think you're covering yourself from the law. Like, I think that's number one. And maybe from driving, depending on what state you're in, you've got a least excuse to say that I have a card.
Yeah.
And then number two would be, what you're getting. Like, if you're getting Durban poison, you're getting Durban poison or the variant of Durban poison. So it's consistent. And then you get it again, it's going to be the same product because hopefully it's clonal. Anyone that grows from seed is probably not doing it right. And then, the prices now, I think there's products on the market that are more expensive than for an ounce than on the street, which some of our products are. And then there's, lower value products that are cheaper than the street. So it just depends on where you live and who your dealer is as well, of course. But I think
it's who you know.
Yeah, but I think in general, the majority, I think a lot of people moving into the medical market just purely for those reasons.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny when you look at the medical market. We're now calling it the medical market, but a lot of these people have just been self-medicating for years.
Absolutely.
They just want an easier way. And there's a little bit of a frustration where it's like, why do we have to kind of almost lie about why we're using it? Like, I just want to say, I just enjoy it.
I think there was an article in Cannabis by Dan Howard from Tasmanian Botanics that was sort of this is a bit, and I don't like the word stoner. I think because it has terrible connotations, not because I'm not proud to be one, but because it just has connotations, right? And I think there's what I think the other thing that is a bit of a personal story, but what opened my eyes to cannabis even more was in California. If you smoke weed as an executive at a software company, that is considered cool and that is considered smart, But if you're a boozer, no. That's not cool. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I was like, hang on a second, this is great. I like this because that's more acceptable and it's a better drug overall, I think. Now, don't get me wrong, I still love a beer, but I'm just saying that, there was a different attitude to cannabis in California. And I think that the society's going to take a little while in general, I think, Josip, to just transition to that because the stoners out there already know this and they're probably already operating at full capacity and still being productive and living full and amazing lives. But, I'm not able to tell everyone that they want to, that they do smoke cannabis regularly and it has no effect on their life other than being positive. So there's a lot of doctors that understand that and they care about quality of life and people's mental health and whatever other conditions they have. But I would argue that the people who are smoking daily, in most cases, are taking it for a medical reason, whether it's diagnosed or not.
Yep.
That doesn't matter. It's just that makes them feel better. And if it makes them feel better, that's why I would consider that's less anxious, which could be the anxiety. I don't know. But I mean, I think there's always something that makes them feel better. And I think we'll get to recrealization. We will, but I'd still say it's a while away after speaking to the government a little bit myself. But I hope that we can get there eventually.
Would you be able to give the audience a guess on like a number of years?
Mate, I've been doing this for a long time. And every time I put down a number, it never comes true. I would say the Labor government is probably more receptive, definitely more receptive than the Liberal government. The challenge, just speaking frankly with what I speak to government about, is the challenge is they don't know how it's going to get rolled out, mate. It's a massive ball ache, basically, to regulate the whole thing because it's got to be regulated like alcohol or
tobacco.
Yeah, mainly I was thinking alcohol, just say alcohol or nutraceuticals or something like that. So or health products or something. So just to say alcohol, it's got to be regulated. So it needs its own departments. It needs each state government to have its own regulatory system and it needs to be transported. It needs to be sold somewhere. So, the challenge with that is you just got to license people. It's going to be like rolling out the medical framework, which was, to be frank, a tough bit of a debacle because they just don't know what they're doing. It's hard, right? And there's so many mistakes that other countries have made, particularly in like California and places where we wouldn't want to make them, or in Thailand, you wouldn't want to make these mistakes, And Australia is a conservative country in general from a regulatory point of view.
Yeah.
And that's positive from a patient safety perspective because it's very unlikely you're going to get a bad product. Like when I say bad product, I mean,
something bad,
contaminated product in Australia. But I think in Thailand or America, you're definitely going to eventually get something if you're particularly going going cheaper products or something like that. So I think, I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm just saying it's less likely in Australia. So I think it's just a big challenge for them to think about all the other things they have to do and at the same time then build a medical cannabis framework. And I think that's going to be a while away. So I would say it wouldn't happen in the government's lifetime that's in today, but maybe in their next if they get elected again, the Labor government, with the Greens pushing and some of these legalised cannabis parties helping out, I think that there's a chance in the following term.
The next term. Yeah, it's definitely not this term, but next term or the term after that, depending. I follow politics quite a lot. It's a weird little hobby. I almost hate that I like it. But I've been following this for so long. And that's actually one of the things that got me straight into cannabis. When I was at university, I was just reading about like why cannabis should be legal. And I just realized that it made no sense. And that got me on my high horse. Like, no, this is a wrong. This needs to be corrected. Like, how do we live in a society that we can live in something so blatantly wrong?
Yeah, Joseph, you won't sleep if you do that. I mean, you should work.
I didn't for many years.
You should work in the medical cannabis industry, and then you'll see all the issues that are blatantly unfair across the industry, and actually favouring certain parts of the supply chain or
I've seen plenty.
Sleepless nights getting angry about it, but nothing changes.
Nothing changes. It's just do your damn work and keep hoping that you're going to outshine whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Correct. Yeah.
So let's bring it back to your soil, because I've been to a couple farms and most of them are growing in cocoa. And don't get me wrong, I've grown before. I got raided for one plant. That sucked. And I grew in cocoa because it was nice and easy, putting your nutrients in. It's quite simple. But my garden outside, I grow in nice soil. Generally, it's pretty organic. Maybe we've used a few fertilizers that probably could have not been in there, but we're in soil. You're growing in soil, and from what I understand, you also grow outdoor in the greenhouse. No,
we're all greenhouse. It's all greenhouse. So controlled greenhouse. We probably have less controls than like a CAN group or an ANTG that would have, more lights and stuff like that. We don't have lights right now.
Supplemental lighting and
yeah, we've got supplemental, but not grow lights, if that makes sense. And then we grow in living organic soil. So that means that we have a bed and it's about 30 centimeters deep, or maybe a little bigger, maybe 40 centimeters. Mm-hmm. We put that soil in there. We mix that together as our own formulation with our agronomist. So we have a full-time agronomist. And then we also dug down into the volcanic soil of Alstonville, where we are, which is a red earth that's come from Mount Warning, which is very porous. So the roots go all the way down into there. And every time we pull them up, we compost those roots and plants, and then the new plants go straight back in the next day. So the soil doesn't change. And then we add compost on top just to make sure that it can get re-energized. And we put the nutrients in back that have been pulled out from the previous grow, and the roots go down even further. So because the soil's been there for so long, it's getting better and better every time, and the roots are going deeper and deeper into the earth, which is pretty amazing. So we love it because we think I believe it's a better taste and smell, having come from California, where they really, not everyone, but a lot of the premium stuff is organic, and that's really what I smoked because I just think it was so tasty compared to the other stuff. And then we don't use any chemicals or pesticides. Everything's organically certified, anything we buy in, but also we create our own compost teas and other compost we put onto the plants.
No, that's a good method. Like I've always known outdoor, soil grown cannabis was always tastier, and generally it still gets to the same potency. Generally speaking, maybe you might miss out, I think, a little bit because you're not pumping it as much as you could all the time, but generally that potency still sticks around. And then because of those terpenes being so strong, I feel like the potency is actually sometimes stronger despite the number not hidden there.
That's exactly what we would say. I mean, the cannabinoid and terpene production you would get in organic, and then also I'd consider sun-grown to be a big factor. So, I've been doing a fair amount of research into this with lights and stuff, and we don't need lights really for spectrum because we have enough spectrum in Byron. So anywhere sort of north of probably Sydney is getting enough spectrum year-round nearly for good cannabinoid and terpene production. But we need it for the growth in winter and autumn and that sort of stuff, just for the daily light intensity to get it up, to get our, yields, and bud quality to be bigger, basically. And I think that's where maybe some of the THC production also comes in as well. So, but sun will always beat lights in terms of spectrum. It won't beat, all round. It won't beat lights in off seasons.
No, that's cool. Now, what challenges have you guys faced with the organic side? Because I know if you've got a living soil, there's a lot of things that can come through with that.
I think we just face the same challenges as any other growers. I mean, it's just pest passage and disease. I mean, I think I've found we've done pots as well. We actually do most of our R&D and our mums in pots. And we find there's more issues with the pots than there is with the soil, because things can get into the pots, right? It's quite easy. They've got to go under the ground and get into the soil. So we test our soil weekly on different parts of the bed, moisture content and obviously composition for any pests and diseases. We have a lot of IPM scouting going on. We have an external consultancy that comes through and does the IPM scouting. So we can't respond, I think, is the issue to these things as quickly as a hydroponic grower can, and we can't spray, right? So we use organic sprays if we can, but we're restricted by what we can do. So I would say in general, we probably get more loss in terms of just, that's it, that plant's gone, we just accept it. But we are constantly trying to improve our genetics and our processes to, improve basically not losing as many plants as we can.
That makes sense. Cool. So
let's go. Definitely a more expensive way to grow from that perspective, because obviously with hydroponics you have a lot more control. That's basically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned genetics. Let's move into genetics, because I have looked at your genetics and it's an impressive little lineup that you have of I guess the market wants us to call it cultivars. I like to call it strains, but you've got a super lemon haze that blew me away as soon as I smelt it. I smelt it from a friend. I was telling you a bit before, and before I even knew what it was, I smelt it and I'm like, super lemon haze, surely. And I looked at it and it was. And that brought me right back into Amsterdam. I was there again. And then I got that scripted and I loved it. I thought it was a really, really, really tasty vape. Exactly what I had in Amsterdam. Like, it was the true strain. And I haven't gone back to your products yet just because I haven't seen my doctor, but I really want to try your Buzzy, the Durban poison. I am such a fan of the Durban poison. It's unbelievable. And I was looking for it on the medical market for, I reckon, 3 years at least. No one had it. And you guys just popped up, and it's Australian grown. So for me, that's a kudos. But how did you kind of decide what lines to grow? Was it what you were trying to treat with for patients, or was it personal preference or popularity?
Good question. Very good question. I think some of it came down to condition. Some of it came down to whether it grew well in our greenhouse ultimately. And other came down to a little bit of, what we saw could be successful or not. Ultimately, we bought a ton of seed in from around the world, but basically we bought most of it in all of it in from the Netherlands, some of it in from other places. We had to bring it in from legal sources. Unfortunately, we couldn't get local genetics because that would have been absolutely ideal for us based on being in a climate that does well and has amazing genetics. But anyway, so we had to just throw down. We did a huge pheno hunt. So I think we tested about 30 strains, and I think we did about sort of 10 of each. So 3,000 plants. And then if they didn't make it through for like mold or pest or whatever, they just got cut, right? So then we just did a huge pheno hunt with our ag scientists, and they ran a big pheno trial. And we just decided on the ones that we wanted a few sativas, we wanted a few hybrids, and we wanted a few indicas. So we just decided on sort of a range that would provide people everything from the big sativas to the medium sativas to the indicas and all that sort of stuff. I can't talk about what they make you feel because that would be advertising potentially.
Our audience knows, so that's all right.
I'm just going to say sativa and indica because that's the thing I can say. So that's what we're just trying to get a range. But ultimately, it did also come down a little bit to what grew well in the greenhouse. But what we're finding also is that, with all plants, there's issues with one and not with another, with all different strains, And then on top of that, there's different seasons. So just because we did the pheno hunt in a certain season doesn't mean in summer or in winter that's not going to be different. So just general challenges. And all growers, except if you're indoor, obviously, will face this because plants just respond differently in different climates. And I think that, you've got your indicas that come from the Afghani region. They probably like the dry heat more and probably don't need as much water. And then you got your sativas, they come from South Africa or more those ones, and they can probably deal with more humidity and that sort of stuff. So, it's been an interesting journey figuring all that out. My business partner, Simon Pettinger, comes from a genetics breeding and tissue culture background. We do our own breeding now on site. I'm not sure if we're the only ones, but we've got 3 breeding chambers. So we've just started popping our own seed and getting our own mums from our own strains. So we're crossing strains in our genetic bank and trying to find new strains, crossing some of our higher THC strains as an example, just to see what would come out to hybrids. So we're probably going to try and start releasing some of our own locally grown and locally bred.
Yeah, that's cool.
We don't really know what to call them yet, but that's going to be a fun session. But I'm
happy to consult there. Don't worry. We can have a chat.
But I think there's a lot of work that goes into it that maybe people don't understand. And because you can't, I think when maybe we're doing illegal, you're probably doing it from seed, right? You're just popping a seed and sticking it in there. We do everything clonally, so we have to hold, a ton of mums. We actually hold some of our mums in tissue culture. So we refresh the mums to make sure they're free of like pathogen and pest. And then you've replaced those mums, and then you put them in, you hold those mums and you put enough cuttings in the ground, and then you go obviously through it. But you have to build up that population from one seed, right? Yeah. So you find the one seed that worked the best, and you love that strain and you think it's awesome. And then you got to go build, in our case, about 20 mums. And then you can go plant, which takes a little while, so probably about 6 months. So by the time you do all the breeding and the propagation and building up the mums, it's probably like at least 18 months.
Yeah, wow, that's a long time. But I
think that's cool. People don't understand that, right? It's taken us a long time to get where we've got to, and that's the effort as well when you're starting this business. I mean, I think now that other people are in the market like me, I can provide other people genetics, so that's a possibility, which just provide you clones. But when I turned up to the market, that wasn't an option, So it's been a bit of a journey to get here. But I think what it's done is allowed us to be good at that. We're good at now doing pheno hunts, and we're good at the breeding, or we're getting better at the breeding now. So it's exciting.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. The fact that you kind of like spawned a little sub business there, the breeding program, like to actually have that. And you've built out your processes there, and you can just start, hunting for some incredible things. And even if it is genetics from overseas, like that's where most of the genetics are coming from to get here anyway. It's cool to see that there's kind of going to be a genetics bank, at least for the legal market, building up somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Our plan is to do that. I mean, I think my business partner comes from that background in the horticulture space. So we have a breeder. And we have a couple of plant scientists that run all those trials. And that's what you were saying about, having a horticulture degree. It does help when you're having to do run of these formal trials to make sure you're doing pheno hunts properly and labeling everything and testing everything. We have an HPLC. So there is an ag science or a scientific approach to this long term. But I think ultimately, like America and Canada, I wish that we had a period where we could bring in whatever genetics we wanted. Like that would have been better. But I think in the future, when it goes recreational, there'll be breeding houses. You'll have your different breeding houses in Australia and probably in New South Wales, Victoria. And there'll be some that are more focused on organic and outdoor and greenhouse, and others that are focused on indoor, So, and then every condition is different, So like, some genetics will go well in Tassie and other genetics will go shit in Tassie, So it's just going to be quite cool, because I think regionally we'll have strains that are good for regions.
That would be so cool, having states trade with each other.
No, but it's true though, because No, if a Durban poison, for example, will grow better in a certain climate, and it won't grow.
Queensland, but you know, in Perth, we want to probably put the Afghanis. It's a little drier there. Yeah.
Correct.
Give them the Murray River. Let's see that happen.
Correct. And you'll find that those things will thrive in those conditions, and then they won't thrive in other conditions, or they won't thrive in a season in that location. So, and these illegal growers already know that, right? They would know. Oh, I put down Durban poison on a summer in my that did shit, whereas I put Bubba Kush in and it did really well. I mean, that they're going to know that, right? This is the bit of the shame where we weren't allowed to get local genetics, because we would have had probably 18 months head start on our genetics program, because we would have just got it from locals who would tell me what grows perfectly in the hills of Tintinbar and Tevin, that's where it's all grown. So it's a bit disappointing.
A little, but at the same time, you got that learning process. Now you know it. So, you're there on the other side. What I was going to ask was, how does it work when you're in the greenhouse regarding your vegetation times? Are you just actually going with the seasons, or are you forcing flower?
Good question. We're going with the seasons right now because we don't have lights. So in summer, it was a different veg period. We moved things through, obviously, propagation and then into veg and then into flower. But now in winter, we've extended those periods pretty dramatically for agriculture anyway. So it takes a lot longer to get the bud bigger and of good quality than it does in summer, whereas in summer it was happening super quick.
Yeah. So are you doing like 2 cycles a year or 3? Like how many times?
Yeah, it's a good question. So think a little differently with us. So if you can see behind me, we have 6 bays, actually 7 bays, sorry, but 6 bays operating right now. So, but with every bay gets harvested in theory every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We have a continuous harvest. We're not doing a whole greenhouse of one crop and then a whole greenhouse of another crop. So there is constantly a leafing, a trimming, a harvesting, a planting going on every 2 weeks. In winter, actually, it's probably every 3 weeks now. But there's always activity and something happening. So we would have 4 to 5 turns a year per bay.
Okay. No, that's cool. A perpetual harvest. Yeah. I remember reading about that, like how to do that in your own home, probably 10 years ago. I got very, very, very invested on the idea of growing cannabis. And then I didn't do it until 2 years ago, but I spent probably 10 years reading about it. I find it funny that we prescribe cannabis for anxiety and depression. But we also know that growing plants helps cure anxiety and depression. Yeah. So it's that catch-22 that just exists for me. I don't know if they'll ever really allow home grow for such a long, long time because of I guess, at least on the outset, it seems like industry wants to be able to clamp on as much as they can, to be able to get those customers or those patients to buy their products. If home grow is existing, it's like, is that going to impact the market that much? I don't think so, but I think there is a little bit of fear that it could.
I think, Joseph, if you look at some of the countries that are doing it well, if you should be able to do home grow, but buy it from a legal source. So, I could provide 6 clones of Bubba Kush as an example, not that I have Bubba Kush, and then that would cost you, $10 each. And that's it. That's you for the summer, right? Because you're probably not going to be, although you might be growing indoors. But then again, regularly I can provide clones and say, this is how much they are, $20, $30 or whatever.
Yeah, or a bit of a registration system.
Or seed, yeah. So then when the cops come along, you go, hey, I bought it from a legal source. Here are my 6 plants. Get out of my house, basically. Yeah. And that's cool. I reckon that's great.
It makes sense.
I mean, you're going to buy the seed from somewhere, whether you're buying it from America or Australia, it doesn't really matter. But I think other people may be harvesting their own seeds and that sort of stuff. But I mean, they can manage that probably themselves without getting caught. So, I think the reality is if we can set it up so it's kind of still touching the industry as such, then it'll make it easier for everyone and everyone from an enforcement perspective, like the government, because that's what they get worried about, like how are we going to make sure what's illegal and what's legal, and then probably keep and all these home growers happy. I think the one thing we've got to be conscious of is just like selling. I don't think anyone should be able to sell their products. Sharing is obviously impossible to stop. So I wouldn't want to stop that, but I'm just saying it's just
sharing is, yeah.
Sharing's caring. Sharing's caring. It's like home brew. But the reality is that if you start putting money into the equation, then you're going to have people who are going to take advantage of that situation and spray pesticides on their plants or do other stuff that's nefarious, and therefore it's going to affect, we're going to have an incident where someone gets affected by it, and therefore it's going to get all shut down. So we just don't want that sort of behavior.
No, that makes sense. I do like the idea of potentially buying it from like legal means. I've always thought, what if your doctor prescribes you that super lemonade, but then they can also get you to connect to the grow, and they can send you some cuttings, right? And then you can grow your own. Therefore, the doctor knows that is actually working for that patient because the patient's provided feedback, for maybe over a couple months. And it's like, okay, now you can have a couple saplings if you'd like to grow it yourself. And maybe
in Canada, the way they rolled out the medical market initially was once you got your card, as in you were a chronic pain patient, they gave you a specification on what you could have. So I think it was like a range with THC flower or THC oil. You could then go buy it from anyone from any supplier in the country, as long as you show them your paperwork and you were on the register, you had a number or whatever. And then you just had to go refresh that every 3 months, I think it was, something like that. And I like that model because it's kind of semi-medical, semi-recreational in a way, but it gives consumers more choice. They don't have to go back to the doctor as much unless they want to, of course, unless they want a more customized program, which I think is totally fine.
Makes sense.
But I think there's a lot of people out there that probably know more about cannabis than their doctors. So I think that's probably a better approach, and something that personally I think is what I'd like to see the government work towards, because that will just be better for patients, better for everyone.
Like fundamentally, the big problem for patients at the moment, I think, is mostly cost.
It is.
It really
Is it mainly the doctor's appointments, or is it mainly the products? I mean, that's the reality.
A bit of both, I think. It depends how we want to look at it, right? Like the doctor appointment on top of everything, and it depends on the clinics you go through. There's clinics that aren't charging for doctor's appointments, but then they charge a little extra for the medication, but they only let you get the medication that they stock. So then it's like, but if I pay for the doctor appointment, I can now actually get proper treatment because I want to be able to get a couple different flower types to see if it helps my conditions more. I've gone through 40 odd medical flowers, and I've actually found a couple that I want to stick to, but I normally have 2 that I keep that are pretty consistent and I don't change them. They're my go-tos. I know they work for me. And then I get maybe 2 or 3 others to just, rotate to see how they are. I want to, get different flavors, different terpenes that hit me, see if it makes it even clearer. Like I'm always looking for a very clear-headed sativa that has very little come down, because I'm someone that's quite productive. I do a lot of work. I like to have a little bit of the medication throughout the day to just kind of calm the bloody nerves down, because I have 28 bloody things on my to-do list and I'm only going to get so many done. I'm looking for, that flower that helps me there, and found it in one flower, but then that batch goes to shit or it goes out of stock, and then I don't know what's good, and then I have to start that cycle again. So I want to have my variety.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that everyone needs to understand is that the way the system has been set up previously, the non-GMP factor with imports, but not with Australian products, has allowed companies importing from Canada to go to a Canadian testing lab and say that this is product.
GMP.
Is THC profile of this, like 30% as an example. That's bullshit. Let's be honest. A lot
of the 30% stuff is definitely not
30%. So you take that to a GMP lab and it'll fall away. So a lot of the products that you're seeing on the market now potentially may not be there, or they won't be at the same level of THC profile that was there previously, because now we're clamping down on essentially getting it tested at a proper lab.
Yeah.
And it's rampant in Canada, and they're trying to crack down on it there. It's completely rampant in California. There's no, you can see 38% on stuff there now, which is a joke. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out over the next few years in particular. But from a grower's perspective, which is why I think you should support Australian growers, is if we could sell it directly to patients, clearly the cost would be a lot lower. but the cost of like transport, the clinic, giving it to the clinics, the pharmacies, all that sort of stuff adds all the cost. And that's the regulatory burden of why the government's put it through a medical program. And that's why I think that if they can, ease that up somehow, then it would be a lot better. I think the other thing that people need to realize is that international cannabis is also probably older. Reality is
it could be seconds, it could be bottom of the bag. Like, we don't know what it is.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So now that's not everyone. I think some of the premium products are very good. Probably anything that's testing at like 20 to 25 is probably very realistic. So I think that's all good. So they're the ones that are probably going to be around. They're probably going to be long-term brands that are going to be successful. But I think there's probably going to be a few falling off either the THC profile or not be around. And that'll be interesting to see what happens in the next year.
That will be. I just feel very blessed with the medical market. The fact that there is so much option, so much choice. It's just like 5 years ago, it was unheard of. Like, you just couldn't comprehend that would exist here. Like, how many years did we have to go find old mate? Like, I just, to be able to sit here and just have such a selection of genetics is unreal. But to your point about Australian genetics, something that frustrates a lot of people about the imports is the fact it's radiated. But I believe the Australian stuff is also radiated.
Yeah, irradiated. Yeah, we don't have. The government in Australia has set the lowest threshold in the world for microbial count. So even if you are an indoor grower, anytime someone touches that with a glove, there's microbes going on it. So it's very hard to even pack something in Australia or pack something anywhere unless you have a super, super expensive process and a super, super tight grow controls to not be irradiated. Unfortunately, growing organically, we've got microbes everywhere, right? They're healthy microbes, but they're microbes. So I wish actually the government would take it away and say there is no microbial count. However, you need to put it on the container and tell people whether if it's a person who's got cancer who has issues with that sort of stuff, it should be on the container. Say, well, this person who shouldn't be smoking this, you know what I mean? Because I think most people don't want to smoke irradiated weed. So
that makes sense. Have like a little warning sticker, radiated, not radiated, like makes plenty of sense.
This is for cancer patients and this is for not, you know what I mean? Like that, and people will quickly, like if you're a cancer patient, you're going to check the label, right? And then I think the government's going to be.
The doctor will as well. Like the doctor's going to have that awareness.
And then some companies will literally just target growing cannabis for cancer patients, which is fantastic because they'll go and do a really good job of it. Whereas probably someone like me, I'm going to start not really going to do that. So because I'm organic. So I think that's the challenge. It's not really a lot of these things have been forced upon us. It's not like we want to do it. Yeah. Like I would rather be sitting here potentially as a recreational person being able to just sell it out of my front door. But I mean, the reality is that's not going to happen for a while.
No, it makes a lot of sense. But what is going to happen for CYMRA? I know you guys have had a very successful medical trial. Do you want to tell us a bit about that and just other things coming up?
Yeah, I truly believe that there is a proper medical market for cannabis in the long term, both recreational and medical, whatever we want to call it. But I think there's a lot of patients out there, particularly elderly patients, who don't have a medication in chronic pain, and we've seen it with opiates being quite
really good.
Yeah, not really good for people long term. I think opiates have their place in short term pain, acute pain. So we decided to run our clinical trial. And we got 40 patients. We basically put them on doses that escalated their dose right up to 30 milligrams per day, which is pretty solid dose. This is mainly opiate naive people, right? This is 60-year-old people. So that not many people at that age would have 30 milligrams of tolerance per day. I know you might, so you might eat that in one.
Give me 100 and I'm still going fine. It's all right.
Yeah, mate.
We've done some naughty things over the years.
Exactly. Don't worry. So I think that, we're talking about cannabis naive. Everyone had to have a washout period. There was no other drugs involved. So it's cannabis on its own. So it turned out it was statistically and clinically significant, the results, where we got a 38% reduction in pain scores, which is a big level of pain, quality of life, as everyone on this call probably knows, in terms of sleep improved, anxiety improved, and general depression and and what other quality of life scores like mood and walking and all that sort of stuff. So it was really successful. But what that means for us is, we've done a phase 2 trial, which is just a smaller population, and it proves that arm, like when you talk about pharmaceuticals, you talk about an arm, the product arm works. So we're good to go there. We know that now cannabis reduces pain. Now we need to compare it against a placebo to see if that works against a placebo. And that's basically what we need to do in the next randomized control study at a larger patient population. So the plan is to do a phase 3 study against a placebo in the next year or so. But that was on our cannabis oil. CYMRA was in the press because we got it published. So I think we're the only company in the world. I'm not sure if there's anyone else that has published a study on chronic pain cannabis in isolation with chronic pain in a formulated medicine. So it's pretty exciting.
No, that's good. I definitely know a lot of older people that just would benefit from cannabis so much. And I think oils are the way to get them to into cannabis. I think it's definitely a lot more accessible and understandable.
Yeah, the reason is, Josip, is that and even if you weren't as much of a bigger cannabis consumer as I think you are, you would as a younger person be okay with the adverse effect, which is I'm super high or I fall asleep or whatever it is. And that's what we did as our youth when probably smoking bongs as a teenager, But that's not when you're 62 and you're trying cannabis for the first time, you don't want the adverse effects, right? And I think what we saw in our study is that all the adverse effects happened, guess when? The first week. They didn't happen when they were on the 30 milligrams. They happened when they were on the 5 milligrams, and that's because they were just getting used to the feeling of being on cannabis and they're building the tolerance in their bloodstream. Whereas someone like yourself, who is probably
endocannabinoid systems pumped to the high heavens.
Yes, correct. It's always in there, right? The THC is always in there. So, for you to get high, it needs to be a large dose. And that's
100%.
But I'm saying for them, they only need a tiny dose and they only need to sit at a level that keeps them below being high. Now, their tolerance will build over time, clearly, but it's nowhere near as bad as opiates building over time because that kills you. So like that, we're saying look at it prior to opiates, and if it doesn't work, maybe you're going to have to go to opiates. But the reality is that it's better than opiates. Yeah,
I've known many. I call them women in pain, actually. I refer to them as that. They've just been hammered with, a lot of conditions, and then they get off the opiates to the cannabis and it just helps. And they're like, it's just unbelievable. I went from scoffing down a handful of pills to absolutely nothing, a bit of oil and maybe a couple pills here and there just to help with that like acute pain, as you said. With the oils that you did that on, was that your 1025 oil?
Yeah, the CYMRA's 1025. Yeah, and it's got a terpene in there, linalool.
Linalool, beautiful. I think something a lot of the recreational community really struggles to understand is CBD. Like they completely dismiss it a lot of the time and its benefits. And with that older demographic, that CBD completely helps remove so much of that psychoactive effect for them with the THC to actually let them stay calm during that medication process. Yes. And what we've seen on the rec side, through years of it having to stay in the underground, they've just pumped the potency of THC, what gets us that high. But CBD has been completely bred out. A lot of doctors talk about that being quite problematic for a lot of the blokes that are just smashing bongs all day. Even on the medical side, there's a lot of doctors that aren't scripting CBD to kind of accompany the THC. And I'm not a doctor. I can't advise, but I just tend to notice a lot of people with the THC just pumping it and not having any CBD. There's a little more anger, a little more like anxiety or just some sort of hypertension that they're always a little on edge. I like that your oil has the CBD and you've got results from it and it's showing that. And to be honest, I'm a bit baked, so I'm trying to get to where I'm going. But
I think the reality is that we saw, and we talk to doctors about this, is that to get to high levels of THC, you need the CBD to what they call it, ameliorate or contra, whatever.
Counter it almost, like it just it reduces those effects.
And I don't think that applies to people who have a high tolerance. I just don't think that it doesn't matter as much. But I think in the people who have never done it, who are 62. they need to get to a higher dose to reduce their pain, because that's how they reduce the pain. And they can't do that if they're just taking THC on its own. They'll get baked, right? And therefore, they're not going to take it. So we felt like the linalool and the CBD helped ameliorate the effects of the THC, which allowed them to get to higher doses. And that's what the doctors saw and told us. What I've also seen is that people can add more CBD if they really need to, if the side effects are making them fall asleep really quickly. But you know what? Like, my mum takes Cybus for sleep, doesn't take it for pain, takes it for sleep. Now, sometimes what I find funny is we've had a lot of patients come back to us with Cybus and say, it made me sleepy. And I'm like, do you want to stop taking it? They're like, no, just want to let you know. I'm like, because the side effects aren't that bad. That's the thing we've got to really think about. Like, none of the side effects in the trial were anything in the categories of like high. They're all just moderate, which is a consideration the TGA calls, when you fall asleep, when you get dizzy, when you get nauseous, and I think someone vomited. But I think that's from the spin, I would say, maybe from getting high. I don't know. But I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are very sensitive to drugs, right? So I think that there's got to be a little bit of mix, particularly in the oils. But I think whole flower, somehow through the entourage effect of the terpenes and other things, allows that itself as well, because there is obviously CBD, a bit of CBD sometimes in whole flower as well. Mm-hmm. But then if you're sticking it into like a dab or something like that, then I don't know. I think that's all just going to be...
You're a little gone there. I remember the first time I had a dab, I started walking and I thought my head was on backwards, and I sat down in the couch and my tongue just rolled into the back of my mouth. I couldn't control my tongue and I was like choking on my bloody tongue. Dabs are definitely something else. They haven't quite cracked into the market apart like cartridges and things.
I just don't think, I think there's a market there, sure, but I think it's not a big market, right?
I don't, well, the people that are going to buy it will make it a big market. But, it's purely for that really intense chronic pain. But I don't know if, like, how do you have a doctor prescribe it and then tell them to use it? Like, how do you tell a patient to use a dab? Like, are you telling them to get like a blowtorch rig? Are you telling them to get a pen? Like, I think that's where that's...
You can sell it in a syringe, which is the distillate or whatever at the 80%.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but then it's not inhalation though.
But you just blob that into the cone or the dab rig and then
vaporizer. Well, the doctor's not allowed to tell us that we're allowed to have cones.
Exactly. So, the doctor doesn't say that, but they let you prescribe the pen that has the syringe that does that. So,
okay.
You just tell the doctor you want the syringe and then they'll probably get it from a compounder or something like that.
Yeah. I actually got some compounded flour recently and blew my socks off for the quality of what it was. It was Canadian, but my God, it was good. Still have a tub of it. I got 30 grams, but
might be harder to get that from Canada now because you can't get non-GMP stuff.
This is actually GMP, so I know who brought it in, and it's good stuff. I like where we're heading with Australian cannabis. It's like people want to talk a little bit of shit on the industry, like it's stopping them from it could just be improved. And I'm like, of course it can. We started from nothing. So it's nice to see this progress is going, and even just having yourself kind of having a little bit of thought leadership of good practices that should be in the industry. The idea of advocating for a bit of home grow, maybe doing some sort of genetic sales, like things like that. Seeing that on my side is just, it's enriching. It's nice to see that it's going to, like, that culture still exists. There's a love of cannabis that comes from you from California, and you've brought it here and you're trying to create that a little bit. The idea of being in a boardroom smoking joint sounds great. Done it myself, but making that a bit more of a standard. I think there's like a better level of consciousness to people there, rather than diluting themselves with alcohol and being a little numb to the things going on in the world. So thank you for joining me on the talk.
Cannabis is just another drug, really, in my opinion. I mean, you've got alcohol, you've got sugar, you've got a lot of other worse drugs in the world. And I think the more people learn about the social benefits of cannabis, the better. I think if you just got to ask the police, like, who would they rather deal with? The guy who's smoking a joint or the guy who's taking heroin or on coke or on weed? Not that I am against all those drugs, but just like, there's obviously side effects for them. So
that's it.
Hopefully the government starts to move forward faster, Josip. But I think the reality is you're right. Like, we've at least made some progress, and I'm happy to be sitting here. Even I can't actually believe it. I sometimes have to pinch myself. But the price, like for patients out there, the prices will come down. The market will free up more, and I think that hopefully one day we'll get to recrealization in the next sort of 5 to 7 years.
Surely, it's surely less than 10. Surely less than 10.
I've been saying that for a while. And
so thank you so much for coming on, teaching us about your farm, a little bit of the culture you're trying to create, your thoughts on legalization, telling us a bit about the study, a bit about genetics. We've learned a shitload here today. I've had a great time. So thank you so much, Joel.
No worries. It was great to be on. Have a good day. You also enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you.